Imagine this. One year, you start finding yourself feeling down all the time, and not just a little sad. You're so sad you don't want to get out of bed. You stop going places, doing activities, and seeing friends you used to enjoy. You stay up almost all night most nights, overthinking everything that happened during the day. And when you do sleep, it's for a good 13 hours. Eventually, your self-esteem drops so low that you start eating less and less until it's just a handful of animal crackers and barely any dinner. You eventually drop down to 103 pounds, stop getting your period, and start losing clumps of hair when you brush it in the morning. Your mother begs you to eat, but you refuse in fear of gaining weight. On top of not eating, you start cutting your arms and legs in order to lessen the sadness. In order to hide it, you wear jeans and a sweatshirt every day, even if it's a sweltering day out. These patterns continue for several more years. Eventually, the sadness gets so unbearable that you think the only option for ending the pain is to swallow a bottle of Tylenol. You end up taking about half the bottle before figuring that will be enough to make you not wake up in the morning. Instead, you spend the night throwing up. Out of shame and embarrassment about what you did, you tell your parents it's probably a stomach bug and don't go to school the next day. Very often, this is how mental health issues play out. They can be scary to deal with if you know someone who is going through something like depression or an eating disorder. You may feel like you're walking on eggshells, only if you misstep and say something wrong, it could make the person get worse. It is 10 times scarier when you're going through it yourself. You don't know who you can trust with this information, and you don't know how to get help. Having all this run through your mind in a day is awful. Here's some sobering thoughts based on the story above. 6.7% of American adults suffer from depression a year. 4% of adolescents in the U.S. will develop symptoms of serious depression every year. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among children and young adults aged 10 to 24. The number of people diagnosed with depression increases by about 20% a year, according to a study at Harvard. Only 1 in 10 men and women with an eating disorder receive treatment. Up to 24 million Americans of all ages and genders suffer from an eating disorder. Men are more likely to commit suicide than women, and are more likely than women to use highly lethal methods to commit suicide. When the amount of people is this high, what can we do to make them feel better and hopefully reduce the amount of people who suffer from mental health issues? One of the biggest and most important things those with mental health issues struggle with is finding an adequate support system. And quite frankly, that's scary. Now, building off of the first story, imagine this. You finally tell your roommate in your second year of college what you used to deal with. She freaks, and instead of going to you, she tells your best friend. Your best friend then tells your boyfriend. Your roommate then tells the hall director and gets her room switched without telling you until the moving carts are right outside the door and completely ignoring the fact that you've been in recovery for several months now. The hall director then assumes the worst and has to talk to you about your prior eating disorder and suicidal thoughts, which feels more like an interrogation than a conversation. Your best friend and boyfriend both say they're there for you, yet your best friend eventually says she doesn't know what to say to make it better sometimes, even though she's a social work major, and your boyfriend tells you to get over it and go eat. This can be common among those who finally tell someone. Many people who don't experience these types of issues don't understand that and saying go eat and just get over it and things like that are incredibly offensive and make the person feel more isolated and alone than they originally did. So how can people learn what to say that will be helpful to those who are suffering? Right now, the best option is more education about mental health issues. Responses such as the ones above should not be a common occurrence. They should be the minority. It could be something such as like spending more time on them in wellness classes. It could be something such as making it an option for loved ones to join in on counseling sessions. This can give the loved ones better insight as to what the person's going through and give them more access to resources that can support the person better. A final option is to give people more access to resources in general. We tend to stigmatize mental health problems. Sometimes they can be deadly serious. No matter how we educate people, we will be able to reduce the stigma and ignorance surrounding these issues. Hopefully, we can do more to help people with this type of thing through education and access to resources before they become another statistic.